On a recent 3-day backpacking trip, I got hit with a bunch of snow, a ton of rain, a bunch of really intense wind, and I stayed warm, I stayed dry, I stayed extremely comfortable on this backpacking trip, and I'm going to tell you how. I have a couple different chairs. My personal preference is the Helinox Chair Zero, and while I did bring it on this recent backpacking trip, just with the circumstances and the campsites we chose, I didn't actually end up using the chair. But if the campsite layouts were a little bit different and picnic tables weren't, you know, within vicinity of the fire pits and that kind of thing, just with the temperatures we were dealing with, I definitely would have busted out the chair, but just because of circumstances, I didn't actually use it, but I was glad I had it. I'm sure most of us are already using a trekking pole. You know, you get out there on trail, you see almost everybody using a trekking pole. Another way a trekking pole can add comfort to your backpacking trip, besides, you know, the help it gives to your knees and that kind of thing when you're hiking along, is using a trekking pole to pitch your tent. So making the switch to a trekking pole tent over the traditional hub pole for a backpacking tent, it's going to save you weight. Having that weight off your back throughout the day is going to be a lot more comfortable. The whole point of saving weight out of your backpack is making a bunch of different changes to save weight. This is just one of them, and it does help. On this recent trip, we had one night where the weather came in so bad, we were forced to crawl into bed around 6 o'clock. That is a lot of extra time to spend in bed. Like, I usually don't go to sleep until around 10, 11 o'clock. So I had a couple hours of hanging out in the tent that I wasn't expecting. I was very, very thankful that I had loaded a couple movies onto my phone, you know, had something to just kind of entertain myself while I was laying there, just kind of kicking back. Now, if movies are not your thing, I know a lot of people like loading up books onto their phones, or a lot of people even like bringing a physical book, but don't underestimate the importance of having something to entertain yourself when the weather goes bad, or, you know, you can't sleep at night, just something to take your mind off things. It does help a lot. Another thing when you are crawling into bed that adds a ton of comfort, and I see a lot of people really overlook, is just comfortable sleeping clothes. Slipping into a nice, comfortable, super soft pair of fleece pants and a fleece top. It's very, very nice, just, you know, nice luxury, nice and comfortable. Comfort is what this is all about. You know, comfort can add a ton of enjoyable experience to you out on a backpacking trip. Don't overlook the comforts on a trip. Don't overlook comfortable sleeping clothes. Now, sleeping clothes are just one part of having a very comfortable sleep in the backcountry. And in the last couple of years, something that's made a massive improvement to my sleep in the backcountry has been making the switch from a regular wide mattress to a wide sleeping pad. So this is a 25-inch wide sleeping pad. Most standard sleeping pads are about 20 inches wide. It may not seem like a ton, an extra 5 inches on the side, but let me tell you, just that extra 5 inches is so nice. It's such a beautiful luxury to have. Since making the switch over to wide pads, I don't even look at my narrow pads anymore. I've actually started selling them all off. I'm gonna hang on to one just for trip-specific situations, but for pretty much everything else, I'm going with wide sleeping pads. I will not go with a narrow pad unless I absolutely have to anymore. Just a ton of extra comfort. It's something that I wish I would have considered at one point sooner. You know, I spent years and years sleeping on narrow pads, and I slept okay, but I sleep so much better on a wider pad. One of the most important things on a backpacking trip is your feet. You know, you're hiking, you're using your feet to travel. That's what's getting you from A to B. Making sure that your feet are comfortable, very, very important. Most people tend to overlook their socks when it comes to their foot comfort. The biggest thing when it comes to socks is a lot of people get it in their heads. Like, you know, most of us get into backpacking because we have a friend that hiked, or, you know, we heard about it from somebody we know. And a lot of us just tend to get the stuff that they had. So if, say, Darn Toughs or Icebreaker or Injinji is what works for that friend, that's what we tend to get and what we tend to go for. Me personally, I go with Injinji toe socks. I've got a bunch of different personal reasons why they work for me. They work. I don't get blisters with the Injinji toe socks. My friend Nathan, on the other hand, he has tried Injinji toe socks, and that was the worst blisters he got on a backpacking trip. Now, he uses Darn Tough socks, and he doesn't get blisters with the Darn Toughs. Me, the Darn Toughs eat my feet. So if you're finding that you're getting blisters on your feet out on backpacking trips, don't accept that this is just the normal thing. You do not have to live a life of blister feet. Just try changing up your socks, try different blends, try different, you know, fabric combinations. Like I said, for me, the synthetic Injinji socks is what works. That may not work for you. You may be one of those people that works with the merino wool blends, but just try out a bunch of different socks. You don't have to live that blister life. Super simple one that can add a ton of comfort to your day throughout the day out on a backpacking trip as we're traveling and, hiking from site to site. When we are loading up our backpack, just taking a little bit of time to think about the order of where we're putting things in our bag and thinking about the order of how things are going to come out of our backpack. Now, when you think about it in this way, take a little bit of thought into, is there anything I may need out on trail throughout the day? A very common one is something like a rain jacket. You never know, the weather may change. You may get a storm system blow in. Having your rain jacket easily accessible at the top of your backpack so you can reach in, pull it out really quickly. You're not digging through, fighting forward, getting frustrated, getting your stuff wet. Just a little bit of thought into how we organize and throw things into our backpack, and just thinking about the things that may come up throughout the day or things that we may want throughout the day, things like snacks. It's going to add a lot of comfort and just make our day a lot more enjoyable, make us more efficient out on trail. Now, since we're talking comforts, I'm just going to say, indulge in your vice. There's nothing wrong with it. I know a lot of people like bringing a drink out with them on trail. If you got a favorite bourbon or a whiskey, and you bring it in a little flask and have a little sip at night. Me personally, I don't drink, but I do like consuming cannabis, and I do like having a hoot in the evenings. That's my vice. That's what I like bringing out with me. Trust me, as somebody who enjoys their vice out in the backcountry, there's no better place to enjoy your vice than out in the backcountry. If you've ever thought about booties and you're on the fence, get yourself off the fence and just get booties. They're comfortable, they're warm, they're awesome. They make your feet look like giant marshmallows. Just get the booties. Out in the backcountry, a lot of times it can be tough to just find an actual good cup of coffee. Instant coffees, they're terrible. I don't care what anybody says. You're not ever going to convince me there's any such thing as a good instant coffee. If you want a good coffee on the backcountry, just get yourself an AeroPress. The thing is awesome. It is foolproof, makes a phenomenal cup of coffee. One of those luxury items that I don't bring on every trip, but if I'm going shorter miles and I do want some luxury and I want a good coffee in the morning, always bring the AeroPress. A big way you can improve comfort on a backpacking trip is just knowing your forecast ahead of time, or just kind of having a decent idea of what the forecast is going to be. Now, this recent backpacking trip that I went on, we knew we were expecting rain. Every forecast we looked at called for rain on 2 days of this backpacking trip. That's the reason we both ended up bringing tarps, and both of us bringing tarps was awesome on this trip. Now, it was awesome to be able to pitch a tarp up over a picnic table. We had a nice dry eating area. I left the tarp up overnight. We got up in the morning after just getting poured on overnight. We had a nice dry place to eat. If you're doing a backpacking trip where you're expecting a bunch of rain, you've got a decent amount of camp time, consider bringing a tarp. Another important tip for wet weather backpacking trips, if you have the ability to get a fire going in camp and you've dealt with wet feet throughout the day, say you have a wet pair of socks that you took off and, like most of us, you hang it in the tent thinking, oh, I'm just going to hang it from the hook, or I'm going to put a line up in my tent and it's going to dry in the tent, and it never works. Let's be honest. If you are dealing with wet feet on a backpacking trip and you're able to get a fire in camp, what I like to do is just find a log or a stump and just kind of prop it up close to the fire so I can kind of flip my socks over. And yeah, you kind of got to watch and you got to, pay attention to what you're doing. Don't let the fire get too hot or it's going to melt your socks and possibly your shoes or your boots if you're drying those out. But just taking the time to dry those things out, if you're putting on dry socks and dry footwear in the morning, it's really nice. Now, speaking comfort on a backpacking trip, and we're going to talk pooping a little bit. Not pooping specifically, but something that we can do after we go number 2 that can add a lot of comfort to us on a backpacking trip. And for me, it's this little baggie here. Now in this little baggie here, this permanently lives in my poop kit, and it's just wet wipes, like baby wipes. I allot myself 3 per day on a backpacking trip. And I just fold them into the quarters and fold them up in half, and they fit kind of nicely folded up in here. And this just kind of lives in my poop kit, and just having the ability to properly clean your back end after going number 2 out in the backcountry. Really, really nice. It's also really nice sometimes you get a couple extra wet wipes and you give yourself a little wipe down. You wipe off the armpits and clean the feet up and that kind of thing. Just get yourself clean on a backpacking trip. You don't have to be miserable. You don't have to be filthy. You can be comfortable and clean. It's okay. So there you go. We are all done. That's all the tips. Now you can go backpacking. You can be comfortable. All you got to do, thank your boy right here. Now if you guys are looking for some more backpacking tips that are going to make you comfortable, make you enjoy your backpacking trips, check out either of these videos. I'm sure you'll find something there you'll enjoy. As always, I'm Maddie. Thank you so dang much for watching. I'll see you guys on the next one. It's almost hockey season. Let's go Oilers.